At first glance, it seems that at this stage of events everything should calm down and silence should prevail. However, that's not the case. The States General no longer exists de facto, which means that the king is losing control over pursuing the very purpose why the States General was summoned: the implementation of necessary reforms and avoiding default of the state. Additionally, the National Assembly and the third estate as a core structure of this organization, they are keen to elaborate on constitution, the implementation of which would inevitably entails the destruction of the whole concept of the Ancien Régime. King understands that perfectly, and so he decides to escalate the situation. On July 1st, he issues the order to deploy royal regiments between Paris and Versailles. The official pretext he uses sounds quite convincing: maintaining public order in the city. Nevertheless, everyone understands that in the worst-case scenario, the king would decide to use force to surpass the National Assembly and reverse the concessions he agreed to make. But that's not the only reason why Paris is in unrest. The more important one is the bread shortage. In one of our previous videos, we have already discussed that in 1788 and 1789 there was an extremely poor harvest caused by adverse meteorological conditions. Additionally, ineffective economic policies such as price control, trade restrictions, and internal tariffs within the country led to a situation where there was simply no bread in Paris. In early July, the National Assembly attempted to deregulate the grain market. However, without concrete measures, the prices continued to rise. July 9th, the National Assembly is renamed the National Constituent Assembly. From now on, the primary purpose of this governing body is to draft the constitution. Meanwhile, events unfold in Versailles concerning the fate of Mr. Necker. Necker sympathized with the Third Estate, and they treated him similarly. He was famous for his economic reforms. The first publication of the state accounts, his desire to alleviate the burden imposed on the Third Estate, and his attempts to bring some sort of equality into society. Because of these reasons, he had also certain enemies in the court. Due to his views, he quite often was compelled to clash with the nobility and their interests, as well as with significantly more powerful individuals, such as Queen Marie Antoinette and the king's brother, Comte d'Artois. Under the strong influence of both, and being dissatisfied with the whole course of action with the States General, the king decided to dismiss the Controller General of Finances. That happened on July 11, 1789. Necker received the royal letter dismissing him and was ordered to leave France. The news had a catastrophic effect on all those gathered in Paris. Necker's dismissal was perceived as a clear signal that the king is ready to use force against the Assembly and people of Paris. The situation when simultaneously three aspects play a role: the bread shortage, military threat, and the minister's dismissal. By that time, the French regiments were considered unreliable from the perspective of military advisors to the king, because of their spiritual connection to protesters and Third Estate representatives. Therefore, these regiments were replaced by German and Swiss battalions that were tentatively more loyal to the king. On July 12, in Palais Royal, the place that was a kind of exile for protesters, the relatively unknown political journalist Camille Desmoulins made his famous speech. He informed people about Necker's dismissal and stated that royal battalions would slaughter the Parisians and urged people to take up arms. On the 13th of July, Parisian bourgeoisie and Parisian delegates to the National Assembly who gathered in Hôtel de Ville made the decision to create the National Guard, a militia formation that would oppose the possible invasion by the royal troops. In the meantime, the Paris mobs continued to arm up. They were looking for artillery, gunpowder, and bread. On July 14th, they stormed the Les Invalides arsenal and seized the cannons and muskets stored there. The next and the main landmark in the city of Paris was the Bastille, the medieval fortress prison where the people of Paris would be able to obtain the gunpowder and other weapons they were seeking. Bastille was also considered as a symbol of royal power, that was the prison mainly for political prisoners. It should be mentioned that one of the adverse associations with the Bastille was the so-called lettres de cachet. That was the sort of letters of imprisonment signed by the king. That was an important abusive instrument used during the Ancien Régime period. The principle is simple. You just put the name into the blank and the person the name you put is simply captivated. These letters were issued and exchanged primarily between the nobles. Therefore, that was an additional source of resentment in the further state. On July 14th, in Bastille there were around 7 prisoners remained inside. The Parisians started encircling the fortress. The military governor of the Bastille, Bernard-René Jourdan de Launay, entered into negotiations with delegates from the Hôtel de Ville. They requested that Launay remove the cannons from the walls and hand over all arms and gunpowder at his disposal. While Launay refused to comply, fearing it might be considered treason, he did remove the cannons in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. However, several saboteurs managed to cut the chains of the drawbridges, causing the gates of the fortress to open. In a state of panic, the defenders of the Bastille began shooting, sparking an exchange of fire with the belligerents. The soldiers, significantly outnumbered by the mob, found themselves in a very dangerous situation when the reinforcements from the National Guard arrived. The fortress was ultimately seized, and upon arriving at the Hôtel de Ville, where Launay was to be arrested and tried by revolutionary court, he was instead murdered by a mob. The storming of the Bastille marked a pivotal moment in the beginning of the French Revolution. After this event, it became clear that there was no turning back. The day of the Bastille's storming, the July 14th, is celebrated in France as the country's national holiday.